Hello and welcome to the 601st edition of the Enfield Talking newspaper, Dateline, 2nd of October 1986. This is the first of the weekly programmes that we mentioned a few months ago, and therefore we are writing another page of history in the life of the newspaper, and we hope you'll enjoy it and the future editions, which will include some fresh items and a magazine together with a new look presentation, so stay with us. In tonight's items we include monkey business at St Joseph's Nursing Home, a house for sale that nobody wants, and how jumping in at the deep end is causing a splash, and the usual roundup of local views, news and opinions, including the latest What's On feature. Tonight your readers are
Diane,
John,
Anne,
and Tony on the controls, and me, Alf, here, passing over to Diane for the first news item. Diane.
A woman on the brink of death was saved by 3 Southgate Red Cross members on Sunday. They were the first on the scene when a woman taking part in a Hyde Park fun run had a heart attack and stopped breathing. Instructor Michael Homan, driver Simon Williams and his wife and navigator Margaret Williams, who were on first aid duty, gave emergency aid and rushed the stricken woman to the Park Medical Centre where her heart was restarted. Southgate's trio, plus a doctor and nurse, then rushed their patient to St Mary's Hospital, where an emergency team were on standby to receive them. The woman is now said to be progressing well. She has regained consciousness and is expected to be out of intensive care shortly. Southgate's efforts merited high praise from Green Lane Centre organiser John Switters. They just performed magnificently. The duty doctor said afterwards that if our members hadn't responded as quickly as they did, the woman would have died.
Enfield Football Club hit the headlines in the local papers this week, but for all the wrong reasons. Busted at Boston, says the Enfield Advertiser. Striking failure, says the Gazette. They were referring to the E's last 2 matches. Last Saturday at Boston, the E's went down 5-1 and lost their unbeaten away record. Whilst at home on Tuesday night, they lost to their close rivals Maidstone United 1-0. It seems that the E's goals have dried up. They had hoped to do well in the GM Vauxhall Conference League this season because if they win, they gain automatic admission to the Football League. On the cricket scene, last Saturday and Sunday saw the final matches for our local sides. Enfield, not the football team, but the cricket team, who play in Lincoln Road, and in fact won the Middlesex County League, played their final game at Wembley, but they didn't end on a high note, going down to Wembley in a very close match. However, Paul Keeble capped a profitable last month of the season with an unbeaten century.
A new swimming pool is to be built in eastern Enfield. It will be sited in Albany Park and will replace the pool in nearby Bradley Road, which the council describes as appalling. However, the committee responsible for the decision, Leisure and Amenities, are unable to agree where in Albany Park the pool should be sited. 2 possible sites have been identified: the former Patting Green, which is approached down Albany Road, and the front of the park bordering Hertford Road. The council expect either site to create a certain amount of added traffic congestion in Hertford Road. If the Patting Green site is chosen, coaches carrying school parties to the pool would need to drive up and down Albany Road, which is a residential road with parking on both sides. In addition, coaches would hold up traffic as they turned into Albany Road from Hertford Road. With the second possible site, coaches pulling up along Hertford Road could cause congestion. Hertford Road estate agent Mark Gilbert predicts building the pool on the Patting Green site would reduce the value of houses along the Albany Road. However, any reduction in house value would be temporary. As people got used to the extra traffic, the prices would tend to creep up, he said. Fellow estate agent Alan Gilbert was surprised the council is contemplating building a pool at the front of the park bordering Hertford Road. I've asked the council to move the bus stop outside my office and put it outside the Albany Park gates. They refused, saying the road bends too much outside the gates, and it would be too dangerous for buses to stop there. If it was not possible for buses to stop outside the gates, then it should not be possible for coaches to do this either, he said. The Albany Park pool is one of the 2 new pools planned for the borough.
Everyone agrees that a drug advisory centre for Enfield is a good idea, but nobody wants it on their doorstep, Enfield Community Health Council heard last week. Plans for the drug centre are reaching the final stages following support for the project from Enfield Council, and the Health Authority at Edmonton offers the most likely site. Dr. Fiona Sims, specialist in community medicine, said that the main functions of the centre would be to offer advice and support to drug users and their families. Drugs would not be prescribed in most cases, nor would they be stored on the premises. The meeting heard that the 2 major options for the location of the new centre were at Southbury Road Clinic and Forest Road, Edmonton. Dr. Sims said, "We now have the funding for a drug centre to be set up, but one of the problems we are faced with is that although people agree such a centre is necessary, they don't want it on their doorstep. As a result, we have been looking for somewhere that is detached but still remains fairly central and easy for people to get on public transport." CHC members agree that the Southbury Road Clinic should continue in its present use and that the Forest Road site was a better proposition. The CHC will now put their findings to the Council and District Health Authority.
8 men were taken to hospital after toxic gas escaped from the Johnson Matthey chemical plant last week. The British Waterways employees were ferried to Chase Farm Hospital by ambulance, complaining of sore throats and running eyes after inhaling steam mixed with hydrochloric acid. They were released after treatment, and there are said to be no lingering effects. Now an investigation is underway into the cause of the accident. The leak first came to light shortly before 9 a.m. last Wednesday. The metal refining plant in Jeffreys Road, Ponders End, was immediately shut down. The escaped gas, enveloped in a shroud of steam, drifted across the Lee Valley to where the workers were unloading goods at the back of the plant. But it wasn't until nearly midday that emergency services or the council were alerted. Peter Thomas, works manager at the plant, confirmed that there had been an accident and said the government's health executive from Cambridge had already interviewed him and the investigations were continuing. Work on that particular process has been suspended. Deputy Environmental Health Officer Ron Taylor said that the cloud was fairly harmless. There is no telling how concentrated the cloud was because it had dispersed by the time we arrived, but the body is quite capable of handling small amounts of hydrochloric acid, he said. Mr. Taylor praised the sensible actions of the firm for shutting down after the accident, but queried why his office had not been informed until 3 hours after the incident. We turned up with the emergency services after the problem manifested itself, he said. Mr. Thomas said he wasn't willing to comment until the results of the investigation were published. We will now be involved in assisting to review safety at the plant and make sure it never happens again.
Bishop Stopford schoolgirl Jackie Kelly completed a double at the Middlesex Schools Under-16 Badminton Championships last weekend. Jackie, who won the Under-12 girls singles and mixed double titles 3 years ago and the Under-15 trophies last year, kept up her record, beating Michelle Smith of Hayes 11-0, 11-0 in the Under-16 girls final, and also took the girls doubles. Her only disappointment came when she was relying on a male in the mixed doubles. They went down in the semi-finals. In the netball, Oakwood once again demonstrated their current fine form by beating Enfield, not the football team this time, 50-35 in a Polytechnic League match. Oakwood led throughout, and their margin of victory reflects the ease which they were able to find goal shooter Kate Harold. Perhaps Enfield Football Club should go and have a look and see if Kate could help them out.
Nobody seems to want the old house at 3 Old Park Avenue, Enfield. Inherited by the Borough Council from the GLC with a sitting tenant in 1960, the property became free when that tenant died. However, over the past year, it's been inhabited by changing groups of squatters, the last of which were removed a few weeks ago. Now the landlord, Enfield's Environment and Committee, has offered both to the Social Services Committee and the Leisure and Amenities Committee, but both said no thank you. Director of Social Services Barry Palmer told his committee that the house would need much money spent on it and it just wasn't a practical proposition. It's been declared unsuitable for residential use because of its disrepair and its closeness to the rifle range. Now the decision of what to do with the house goes back to Environment and Land Councillors, since the suggestion of community use has been turned down.
3 crime items for you. Leather concessionaires of Ordnance Road, Enfield Lock, are offering £1,000 for information leading to the recovery of leather jackets stolen from their premises last week and to the apprehension of the raiders. Some £35,000 to £40,000 worth of men's jackets were stolen from the factory retail shop last week. 3 men are believed to have carried out the raid, having first deactivated the alarm system and cut the telephone wires. They were using walkie-talkies and got away in a white Renault van. A 45-year-old Edmonton woman was attacked as she walked to her home on Friday afternoon last week. The incident took place at 3:05 p.m. in Bridport Road, where a youth approached and tried to grab 2 gold chains from her neck. The woman was pulled to the ground but bravely fought off the attacker, who fled empty-handed. And in another street attack, a 16-year-old girl was robbed of her purse containing £50. The incident took place at 11 p.m. on Friday outside the Bottle and Basket off-licence in 4th Street. A man walked up to the girl, who was standing with her boyfriend, grabbed her purse and escaped in a waiting blue Avenger car. A man posing as a telephone engineer conned his way into an Enfield house but left empty-handed when the householder asked him to leave. The trickster, whom residents claim had been seen in the area frequently in recent weeks, is described as black, 6 foot tall, unshaven, and wearing a brown cardigan and scruffy trousers.
One more of our horror stories for this week. An Enfield teacher who was a passenger on one of the trains involved in the horror crash in the Midlands hit out this week at British Rail for their callous attitude to passengers on the crash trains. Karen Marshall, who is a teacher at Durrant's Special School in Pitfield Way, Enfield, was on the 5 o'clock London to Manchester train when it collided with the Liverpool to London train on Friday, September the 19th. Karen said, "I was in the 3rd carriage from the front, and the first thing I remember about the crash was our train braking very hard. We then heard a tremendous bang and our section of the train was thrown on its side. I remember people shouting and screaming, but we were all dazed by what had happened. The nearest village to the crash was Colwich, and the villagers responded tremendously when they saw what had happened. Men, women and children brought us blankets, clothing, tea, and helped us out of the train, and then the emergency services arrived. Villagers let us use their homes as shelter and to telephone relatives. I will never forget their kindness." Karen suffered bruises and cuts and was severely shocked by the crash. However, she is very bitter about the way British Rail responded. She added, "Those fit to travel were put on a train to nearby Stafford, where we joined another London train to Manchester. Naturally, we were unsure of travelling by rail again so soon, but nobody from BR said anything to us or even apologised." Karen has written to British Rail complaining about their treatment of passengers in the crash, and she is now waiting a reply.
Argentinian ace Ozzy Ardiles has given up smoking in an attempt to recapture his best form during his farewell season at Tottenham. The diminutive midfield genius enjoys a cigarette every now and then, but is now making the effort for the sake of the club. He said, "It's going to be hard to give them up, but I'm sure I can succeed. It would be nice to have a really memorable final season at Tottenham." Ozzy, who is 34, signed for Tottenham in July 1978 for £325,000 from the Argentinian club Huracán, and has made well over 200 first-team appearances for the club. Boxing. Enfield Amateur Boxing Club are expected to take part in this year's National Association of Boys Clubs Championships. The local elimination rounds are to be held at Finchley and District Amateur Boxing Club at Anchor Hall, Bulwer Road, New Barnet on Tuesday, October the 21st.
Late-night shopping at Enfield's Palace Gardens is being extended. Until recently, only Waitrose supermarkets stayed open until 8 p.m. on Thursdays and Fridays. Now other units in the precinct are keeping their doors open until 8 on Thursdays, says Centre Manager John Rapley. The idea was mooted at a traders' meeting and is expected to continue on a trial basis for some months, he said. Hopefully it will carry on and extend to all shops, he said.
We'll drink to that. The brainiest pub regulars in Enfield collected their tankards and trophies on Saturday night. Captained by 1983 National Mastermind champ Chris Hughes, the team from the Southbury Hotel beat 14 other pub teams to place in the London's final, held later this year. They'll be hoping to repeat last year's citywide success in the Interpub quiz contest.
A very unusual garden came under the appreciative eyes of the Mayor of Enfield when she visited Capel Manor. It has been designed especially for the blind. Councillor Reardon was told that when it is completed next summer, the garden will contain aromatic blooms, textured surfaces and lots of similar features that will appeal to the other four senses. She was also shown round a garden for the disabled that has been built at the manor in Bullsmore Lane at Enfield, which allows gardeners to work from wheelchairs. She was very impressed with it all, said Estates Manager Nick Evans after the visit. Councillor Mrs Reardon went to look at the Manor's Environmental Centre in Bulls Cross Ride, where a new piggery is being built. All the work on the gardens and piggery has been done by people from the Manpower Services Commission's community programme.
A wrangle between the Intimate Theatre and Enfield Council may see the Green Lanes Palmer's Green venue forced to close. Theatre manager Bob Dixon is involved in a lengthy row with the council over licensing and payment of fees, members of the Public Services and Protection Committee heard last Monday. To press for payment in full of the fees owed may force Mr Dixon, who is seeking a reduction on the £1,342 owed, to close the theatre completely. However, if he does not meet the council's wishes and continues to hold performances, he risks prosecuting for operating without a licence, they heard. 8 productions are booked at the theatre between now and Christmas, said Councillor Duncan Lewis. He suggested the council defer action until after the festive season to ensure the shows did indeed go on. Members agreed to ask Mr Dixon to apply for licences for the year beginning November the 1st, 1986, and submit the full fee. The council will consider a reduction in fees if he produced audited accounts, they suggested. Their recommendations will go before the full council when it next meets. The theatre has operated without any licences since October last year. Previous requests for audited accounts to be submitted have not been met.
Former Enfield milkman Ronald Angel is now carrying out what must be his longest ever round. Mr Angel, who served at the dairy from the age of 13 until his retirement, is driving a milk float from Land's End to John O'Groats. He's hoping to raise £35,000 for the A1 Dairy Benevolent Fund. A former St Andrews School pupil and St Andrews Church choir boy, Mr Angel spent 9 of his working years at the Enfield Highway Dairy. He is now retired to live in Letchworth. Mr Angel set off from Land's End last week and hopes to make it to John O'Groats by October the 6th.
Oh, that's a little bottle, isn't it? Enfield Lions Club have pounced on litter problems by sponsoring 10 new litter bins for Enfield Town Centre. Lions Club past President Dr Ramanhad Shah pronounced the first bin open outside Enfield Town Station in Southbury Road last week. Chairman of the Keep Enfield Tidy campaign, Councillor John Payne, thanked the Lions Club for 2 bins, which cost them £375. And he said, "We are trying to make people aware of the problem, particularly children who are more vulnerable to the health risks caused by rubbish on the streets."
Risley Lodge at 91 Wellington Road, Bushhill Park, will be extended if Enfield Council grant planning approval. The applicant, Mr A. Higgins, wants to build a 2- or 3-storey extension at the back of the residential home for the elderly to provide 19 additional bed spaces. The plans also call for parking spaces in the front garden. The council is also to spend around £40,000 adapting a house for a family with a handicapped child. The conversions to the 2-storey house in Central Avenue, Lower Edmonton, will include an extension, new bedroom, kitchen and bathroom, and a wheelchair store. The work could be completed by early next year. But a plea for money from a gypsy group has gone unheeded by Enfield councillors. At a meeting last week, members voted not to make a grant to the National Gypsy Council because they were told they received no service from the group. Councillor Graham Eustace told the Housing Committee that they were already doing their duty towards gypsies by providing them with a site at Montague Road, Lower Edmonton. And although the Labour members suggested they should donate £500 to the group, this was dismissed as money down the drain by the Tories.
Work has been begun on the new Our Lady of Walsingham and the English Martyrs Church in Holt Whites Hill, Enfield. The old church was demolished and the land sold to make way for a property development by Langs. But after much negotiation, the church have come to an agreement for a replacement modern church to be built on a strip of land alongside the old church. Work should be finished in June of next year, Herbert Vaughan, editor of the Parish magazine, said.
A problem that has puzzled parents and postmen for years may soon be solved, but it could mean a clash between two sets of stubborn school governors. The trouble has been caused because the names of two Enfield schools are so similar they're often mistaken for each other. Instead of going to Chase School in Churchbury Lane, visiting parents sometimes end up at Enfield Chase School, a mile away in Hollywalk, and vice versa. And it isn't just parents who make the mistake, Chase headmaster David Higgins said last week. Letters and school books are delivered to the wrong address almost every day. Until recently, the problem was lessened to some degree, he added, because Chase was a single-sex school, known to most people as Chase Boys. This made it less easy to confuse with Enfield Chase, an all-girls school. But now Chase has become mixed, and the confusion has got worse, he said. The chairman of Enfield's Education Committee, Councillor Alan Amos, said the only way ahead now was to arrange a meeting between governors of the two schools to try to find a solution.
Solicitor and lay reader John Burrows has died while holidaying with his family in France. He was 50. Mr. Burrows, who lived in Cock Foster's Road, Hadley Wood, was staying in Port Camargue with his wife Mary and his 3 children, Rosemary, Jennifer and David, when he was taken ill. He died a week later in hospital in Montpellier. Mr. Burrows had recently become a senior partner with the Barnet firm of solicitors Derek Bridges and Company. Mr. Burrows was a joint founder of Christchurch Youth Club Cock Fosters and belonged to the church choir for about 30 years. He was recently licensed as a lay reader and elected a church warden.
Edmonton Salvation Army paid tribute to long-standing member John Parnell with a special Desert Island Disc evening. Mr. Parnell, well known in the pubs and clubs of the area as the cheery war cry salesman, has been with the Army for 54 years. He has been doing what he calls the pub round for 26 years, but for the past 40 years he has been the young people's treasurer. Recently, the Army showed their appreciation for his work with an evening dedicated to his career. With palm trees decorating the stage, Mr. Parnell chose 6 of his favourite tunes for the Desert Island Discs, which were sung by the Young People's Singing Company. Some of the tunes I chose were the same ones that I used to sing when I was in the singing company as a boy, he said. But it was the Anthem for the Free, played by the Army Band, which touched Mr. Parnell's heart. It was his daughter's favourite tune before she died last year. Mr. Parnell, aged 63, has continually worked with youth within the area. In 1953, with the help of his brother David, he began picking up children in the outlying areas of Edmonton and taking them to Sunday school. He ran this service until 1969, when the Salvation Army brought their own minibus. Raymond Borum, press officer for the Salvation Army branch, said Mr. Parnell often spends time with the families of the youngsters and guarantees the children a good time when they go on outings. A well-known figure in the area, he joined the mission in Tottenham at the age of 9 before his family moved to Edmonton. Now working in the distribution department at the Salvation Army shop in Judd Street, Mr. Parnell recalls working for the Cook and Jones pawn shop near Edmonton Town Hall. I started there at 14. I'd sell anything from hobnailed boots to blankets, he said. From there he became manager of a carpet shop before devoting all his time to the Army. But despite all his years with the Army and a fond thank you from all those at the 4 Street Citadel, Mr. Parnell of Berry Street, Lower Edmonton, says he has no plans to put down his collection box and war cries and stop his lessons at Sunday school. I shall continue until I can work no longer or whenever they don't want me any more, he says.
An Enfield councillor would like to see public toilets for dogs built in all the borough's parks. A similar scheme in Barking, where else, kept 60 tonnes of dog mess off grass and play areas in a year. Councillor Simon Kaplan works for Barking Council, which piloted Britain's first public convenience for dogs. He wants Enfield Council to look at the cost of funding such a programme here. It cost $14,000 to launch in Barking and covered 25 parks and playgrounds. He said the scheme was highly successful. It involved putting bins to collect dog mess at the entrances and exits of parks and employing wardens to make sure dogs used the bins or that their owners cleared up after them. The Council Public Services and Protection Committee will raise the plan at its next meeting and will also comb through the borough's bylaws to see if they contain any penalties which may be used to curb lax dog owners. One person who would salute any plan to keep dog mess out of its parks is Robert Offredy, who lives on the edge of Durance Park near Hertford Road. He said dogs use the park as a public toilet already. He said the park is a health hazard and wants the council to plough it up and cover over the mess. Mr. Offredy no longer lets his children on the grass. The last time he did, his 2 children aged 3 and 5 came home with dog mess on their bikes, toys and boots. He was even more upset when he heard a person with a dog say they weren't going to exercise their dog anymore in the park as it was too dirty.
Enfield-based firm Thorn EMI is off in search of Eastern Promise, along with another 50 British firms this autumn. The electrical company is taking part in a trade week around Saudi Arabia, which coincides with the visit by the Prince and Princess of Wales to the country in November.
Computer equipment costing thousands of pounds is being bought for Enfield schools. 6 secondary schools, Aylwood, Edmonton, Enfield Chase, Enfield Grammar, Salisbury and Southgate Lower, look like getting elaborate computer networks. The rest of the money, which totals around £175,000, will provide computers and software to be used by primary school children and business studies students. The shopping spree was approved at last week's school subcommittee meeting, and afterwards Chairman Councillor Alan Amos said a large number of schools will benefit. He said it was absolutely vital to provide schools with new technology, explaining, "We are training youngsters in new modern skills which will be vital to the future of the economy."
Trainee chef Robin Spooner went to great heights to prove his culinary skills. The 17-year-old from Devonshire Road, Palmer's Green, was given the tough task of preparing a full dinner at the top of a wind-swept mountain in Wales. It was all part of catering skills competition for trainees organised by United Biscuits. Robin, who works at the Groucho Club in the West End, was chosen from over 5,000 entrants to take part in the taxing trials. As well as catering tests, Robin tackled an RAF assault course, orienteering and bridge building at Llangollen. I can't pronounce Welsh. But unfortunately, Robin lost out in the closely fought contest and wasn't chosen to go on to the finals. A spokesman for the organisers of the competition said he did brilliantly to get as far as he did. His work was of very high standard, but not quite good enough to get him through.
That brings us to the end of the first item on the news tape. Would you kindly now extract the cassette from your machine, turn over, and we'll see you on the other side with more news.